tackling stories and controversies with thought-provoking analysis. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Humble Badger Podcast. And here's your host, the Humble Badger.
I don't have to agree with you, to like you, or respect you. Now this is one of my favorite quotes, because I think it brilliantly captures a sense of what has gone missing from our polarized world right now. Who said this? I find it shocking to see how many misattributed quotes there are out there. And since I do not want to provide any contributions to those misattributions, I researched this as best as I could to find the original source. With the magic of search engines, it wasn't that difficult, and it makes you wonder why more people don't take the literal second to search. The quote is widely attributed to Anthony Bourdain. For those of you who don't know who he was, Anthony Bourdain was a chef, an author and TV presenter who produced shows such as No Reservations and CNN's Parts Unknown. He traveled the world in search of a better meal and often found solace in those whom he shared those meals with. He passed away earlier this year. The cause of death was suicide. May he rest in peace. It is no surprise to me that the quote would be his. It certainly sounds like something that he would have said, and more importantly, it is exemplified in the life that he led. Bourdain's death was felt by many who never knew him personally, because people were not only intrigued by his job, but also his personality. He simply seemed more honest. He was clear about his past, honest about his flaws, and had no issue in showing his vulnerability. Some have described the way his life ended as cowardly. That is an unfortunate stance. These are people who clearly do not understand the devastation mental illness imposes on someone. Mental illness is something that is so widespread that you all know someone who suffers from it even if they haven't disclosed it to you. Sometimes they don't even know themselves. The vast spectrum of these conditions is very much misunderstood in our world today. I get it. They often have no known cause or cure and do not fit in neatly with other diseases. You can't see the havoc mental illness causes in one's brain. Ultimately, Bourdain didn't give up or cop out. He finally succumbed to the crippling disease that he fought valiantly against for decades. Mental illness torments millions, and any of these people would want you to remember their life more than their death. For that matter, don't we all wish that for ourselves? Even if you continue to think that his death was more undignified, I can assure you that his life was not. I hope that you will join me in remembering his life more so than his death. Bourdain was the type of personality that you would have wanted to host you in a foreign land. He was a guide, a bridge, a liaison. Back in 1994, when Bourdain was just an unknown chef, it was reported that just over 10% of Americans held passports. Today, that figure is over 40% and growing. Bourdain spoke to this increasingly worldly crowd with the same voice that he spoke to the crowd that could only dream of travel. A talented wordsmith whose expressive style transported you to the land that he was immersed in. Bourdain once described an anti-poaching unit in Kenya as aggressive, inclusive, and cutting edge. How ironic, considering that these are the very words I would use to describe Bourdain himself. He was aggressive about travel, showcasing starry destinations like New York, London, and Tokyo. But these stories were interspersed with tales from places that governments warn you and beg you not to go to, like Myanmar, Libya, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Detroit. He also visited forgotten places along the way, Appalachia, Tashkent, Calcutta, seemingly just to remind us that faded glory is glorious nonetheless, and vibrant life continues there unabated. He was inclusive as he understood the responsibility of having a voice to describe other people and cultures. His novel approach was to ask them how they felt about their image and give them a say in how they were portrayed. The answers of the locals were often enlightening and contrary to our preconceived notions. Bourdain yearned to present a more complete picture of a lot of these destinations that we saw from afar and often read about poorly in the news. With many powerful and famous people of many stripes appearing as guests, he demonstrated that he had no issue in speaking truth to power. What was impressive to me, though, was how he spoke to the main power in any television show: the audience. On multiple occasions, he educated his audience with uncomfortable facts about their own creature comforts and conveniences, connecting them unavoidably to poverty and misery elsewhere. This increased awareness among people and had the potential to spark change. Now that is cutting edge. So why am I telling you about Anthony Bourdain? To be frank, he is one of my inspirations and definitely a catalyst for this podcast. Anthony Bourdain changed the way we view the world and encouraged introspection as well. He strived to provide the world with food for thought, and it is my intention to carry on in this same spirit. I want to explore the world, not only through food, but through conversation, and bring you viewpoints from various people. It is in the rich tapestry of people and conversations that life becomes more interesting. And I hope that you will find this podcast delivers, if nothing else, interesting and thought-provoking conversations. Thanks for tuning in. I am the Humble Badger, and this is the first episode of the Humble Badger podcast. The topic of this episode is talk. I wanted to give you a small sample of what to expect with the talks that are upcoming in this podcast series. Talk is about more than the spoken word. People talking generates ideas, bridges gaps in understanding, and can propel humanity forward. The flip side is that talk can also be hurtful, corroding, and contribute to marginalization. Talk can be used as a weapon. It can be sharp or blunt, obvious or like a Trojan horse. We speak in order to give information or express ideas or feelings, converse or communicate by spoken words. Yet many of us do not know how to talk with one another. We often aim to respond and not to listen. Some talk to you in their free time, and some free their time to talk to you. It is important to learn the difference. So, let's talk. First, I guess I should address why this show is named The Humble Badger. Well, badgers are simply awesome creatures and have many qualities we should aspire to as humans. For starters, they are very determined. In fact, the verb to badger, as in to badger or pester someone repeatedly for something, likely comes from watching a determined little badger get what they want. Badgers are also famous for punching above their weight and for being fearless. These are good qualities to emulate as a person, and especially as a speaker. Badgers are depicted in stories usually as wise and kindly animals, a la The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Take the rugged tenacity of the real badger with the wisdom of the mythical badger, and add the fact that the habitat of a badger is called a set, and you have great characteristics for a podcast personality. Why humble? Well, just as the badger is wise and confident in their abilities, humble represents the flip side. The humility specifically refers to learning. When we are humble in admitting that we never have all the answers, our minds become more receptive to learning. So, the humble badger intends to learn as much as possible and is determined to share this information with you from the set. Hope that makes sense. If not, just remember that the logo is quite cute and you should listen anyway. So, back to the spirit of the podcast itself. Let me give you an example of the kind of approach I intend to take. Back in the 1970s, the American corporation Caterpillar took out a series of ads in National Geographic. They would present two contrasting views. For example, number 1, that dam destroys the beauty of the land, versus number 2, it controls water to help prevent flood destruction. Then there was the tagline, there are no simple solutions, only intelligent choices. When I read this as a kid, I found this approach to be amiable to my personality. And in my personal and professional life, I have always tried to get as many divergent opinions before making an attempt at intelligent choices. Now, I didn't always succeed since my choices sometimes were far from intelligent. But I definitely had some interesting experiences that I was able to draw lessons from. I want to now present you with two contrasting viewpoints. Now, these are not necessarily my own opinions, but it will give you a window into how my mind works. Maybe everyone's mind works like that. My mind seems to be trained like Pavlov's dog to offer a counter to its own thoughts. I suppose it's healthy in some ways, and strangely paralyzing in others. This forces me to seek counterpoints and research alternatives even for the most benign topics, like breakfast. Anyways, take a listen. I certainly believe that it is possible to love somebody without necessarily liking them. After all, many people around the world live with this reality every day with their families. But recently we have witnessed the breakdown of all kinds of personal and professional relationships over what appears to be on the surface as superficial political disagreements. Or are they? It has now been a few years since this current round of controversial elections began in the Western world. Recent campaigns in countries like the UK, France, Germany, Canada, and of course the big one in the United States, saw politicians rip and tear open the heretofore minor fissures in the electorate. There was no longer room for polite society and political correctness within politics. The ubiquity of social media combined with the constant 24-hour news cycle served to amplify and aggravate even the most radical views. It has now been a couple of years since this started, and yet to this day there are many people who still do not speak to friends, family, or co-workers who happen to vote for the other side. There seems to be a sort of totalitarianism that is infecting public and private conversations. What started in politics has expanded like a cancer to the rest of our lives. More and more in society, we see this desire to suppress or remove contrary viewpoints. People live in ever-increasing media and conversational bubbles that only serve as echo chambers to reinforce entrenched views. As this cycle continues, people continue to add emotion in increasing amounts. They are then rewarded for this by social media companies through ad revenue and dystopian reinforcement. Those same social media companies then succumb to mob mentality and remove their platforms to silence them. This makes for a toxic environment, and if it's allowed to continue, it will overwhelm civil debate. Today, people are afraid to ask even the most benign questions for fear of causing offense and backlash. If we are all walking on eggshells, then how will we function and progress? I would urge you to consider contrarian viewpoints. Advocating your views should not require you to dismiss others prior to listening to them. Freedom of speech is of paramount importance to the continued existence of an enlightened society. On the other hand, we have choices now that we never had before. Demographic and technological changes allow for people to hear from the voices that they want to hear from. Is that not an essential freedom? The freedom of choice? While I certainly understand the value in giving contrary viewpoints a listen, I would qualify this with a disclaimer. How you present your view matters as much as what view you are promoting. One must present views in a respectful manner. There is a difference between telling it like it is and purposely aggravating your opponents. When you are debating with loved ones or colleagues, I would strongly recommend that you add a filter, because politics will change and pass. But your relationships shouldn't be sacrificed for mere differences in opinion. If you are the one responsible for the creation of the toxic environment and you refuse to change your approach even after appeal, then I can't blame anyone for jettisoning you from their lives. I would never ask anyone to maintain any relationship in their lives if it doesn't bring value. If someone's views are causing you undue stress, it is my full recommendation to remove that person from your life. There are some people who delight in intentionally causing offense and arousing strong reactions. These insecure bullies, which sadly include many people in important positions, are simply too toxic to keep around if you have the choice. Life is too short to waste time with toxic people. Now we live in the age of so-called fake news and alternative facts, where many people believe that the media is the enemy of the people. This kind of talk is encouraged by some in power who want to control the narrative at all costs. There is a difference between a fact and an opinion. Some things are not up for debate. To be willfully ignorant is not a virtue. Freedom of speech is abused and misunderstood. The principle protects you from government reprisals, not from the consequences that include being ostracized from civil society if your words are found to be uncivil. So what do you think? What is the more correct viewpoint? Could you tell the difference? Nuance can be confusing. Context matters in everything, and what applies in one situation does not necessarily apply in another. It is the same for people. One of you prefers free speech to be unencumbered. Another person in a different situation with different life experiences would prefer that speech is tempered by respect. Is one more correct? Not necessarily. Can they both be correct? Maybe. It depends. So basically, the Humble Badger podcast is an editorial talk series that will try to present views on a wide range of topics. To be clear, we are not trying to change your mind. We are here to present views, and if your mind is changed or your opinion evolves, so be it. I, for one, will not be shy about sharing my opinion, but keep in mind that not everything that is presented is necessarily my viewpoint. One thing you can be sure of is that I will do my best to present views as respectfully as I can. I know that even with this aim, I might end up losing some Facebook friends, or worse, lose people in real life. That would be sad, but the truth is that some people are uncomfortable with controversy, and I wish them well in their journey. This podcast will not be as long as others you may be used to. It aims to be an appetizer podcast that will hopefully serve as your gateway to the wider world of podcasting and talk radio. We strive to provide a show that is responsive to your feedback as well. On that note, I would like to address one question that we have already received. Is this podcast appropriate for children to listen to? I'm not here to tell you how to raise your kids, but keep in mind that we do not intend to filter the podcast. It is definitely aimed at a mature, not necessarily an adult audience, so listener discretion is advised. Since this podcast started out with an Anthony Bourdain quote, it is fitting to also end it on the same theme. Despite numerous offers, Bourdain did not endorse many products. Wishing to highlight craftsmanship, he agreed to do a small YouTube series for the Balvenie distillery called Raw Craft. They ran a small tribute during the Emmy Awards and the final complete Parts Unknown episode on CNN. Controversy followed the ad as it was slammed by some as tasteless and tone-deaf, disrespecting the dead, placing marketing above morals, and making a mockery of mental illness and addiction. I will reserve comment on this controversy for another time. For me, it was the message that resonated above the Scotch commercial. Then again, I hadn't heard of Balvenie prior to that ad, so I guess the advertising worked. Have a listen to what Bourdain says in the ad.
It's not always a great idea to follow your passion. If you're passionate about something you will never be good at some point you're going to have to recognize that. But if you feel in your heart, if you know, if you have reason to believe that you can be awesome at something, that you can do something unique that will shock and astound and terrify people and bewitch them, do that.
The spot then ends with the writing, "And so you did. We're proud to have shared the journey. Follow your passion. Lofty goals." We hope that this podcast will be of interest to you because we do get to follow our passion in producing it. There is a great team behind the production of this podcast. I firmly believe that no person is an island, and I am fortunate to work with some very talented people. Always feel free to suggest topics and provide feedback. You can interact with us on social media at The Humble Badger or at The Humble Badger Podcast is the handle, depending on the platform. The website is thehumblebadger.com, and that has all the links as well. Check it out. Until the next episode, this is The Humble Badger, signing off from the set.
Thank you for tuning in to the Humble Badger podcast. For more information, please visit thehumblebadger.com. The Humble Badger podcast is produced by the Pablo Dassen Company. Context matters. See you next time.